The arrival. The Earth had been at peace for over a century, and space travel had become as routine as a walk in the park. Humans had spread out across the stars, making contact with dozens of alien species, some friendly, others indifferent. Yet there was one race that humanity had never fully understood, the Voralans. Their name sent chills down the spine of anyone who had heard the stories. They were a race of beings known to be both fearsome and mysterious, feared across the galaxy not just for their physical power, but for the strange, insatiable hunger that set them apart from all others. Ethan Coleridge, an explorer from Earth, wasn't one to be easily frightened by rumors. After spending years traveling through remote and hostile regions of space, he had learned not to trust second-hand stories. He was curious, driven by a desire to explore the unknown. That's why, when the opportunity to study the Voralans arose, he didn't hesitate. The mission was straightforward: land on the Voralan homeworld and attempt to make peaceful contact. Of course, the Voralans were notorious for refusing visitors. Most who landed on their world either never returned or came back too frightened to speak of what they had seen. But Ethan was different. He wasn't here to make idle contact. He was here to discover the truth. What made these alien women so feared? What was the real story behind their infamous reputation? Ethan's ship, the Star Voyager, glided silently through the cold void of space, nearing the blue and silver planet of Voral. As the planet came into view, Ethan marveled at its beauty. It was unlike anything he had seen before. The surface shimmered with an ethereal glow, a mixture of crystal-like structures and vast fields of silver sand. It looked peaceful, almost inviting. "Control, this is Voyager. I'm approaching the designated landing zone," Ethan said into his communication system, his voice steady but filled with the excitement of discovery. "Roger that, Voyager," the voice from Earth replied. "Stay safe out there. And remember, no one knows what you'll encounter." Ethan smiled. That's what makes it fun. As his ship descended, the landing thrusters activated, sending a soft hum through the hull. The ship touched down on a flat expanse of shimmering sand. There was no welcoming committee, no signs of life, just silence. Ethan grabbed his gear, a small pack filled with essentials, and strapped a communicator to his wrist. He was ready for whatever awaited him. The airlock hissed open, and Ethan stepped onto the surface of Voral. The ground beneath his feet was surprisingly soft, the sand shifting slightly with each step. The sky above was a deep, endless blue, with twin suns casting an eerie, silvery light across the landscape. The atmosphere was breathable, though slightly heavier than Earth's, and the air carried a faint, sweet scent that was oddly calming. As Ethan began walking, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every now and then, a flicker of movement would catch his eye, but when he turned to look, nothing was there. He continued forward, heading toward a formation of crystalline structures in the distance that glinted like glass under the sun's light. Suddenly, a sound, soft, almost like a whisper, reached his ears. He froze, scanning his surroundings. The crystalline trees nearby rustled, though there was no wind. Ethan's heart raced, but he kept his cool. He knew the stories, knew what to expect, or at least he thought he did. From behind the crystalline trees, they emerged. Tall, graceful figures, their skin varying shades of deep azure and shimmering silver, appeared in the distance. They moved with a fluidity that was almost unnatural, their long limbs and elegant forms both captivating and intimidating. Their eyes glowed faintly, as though lit from within, and their gazes were fixed directly on Ethan. There were 3 of them at first, but more followed, emerging silently from the shadows of the trees. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. These were the Voralans, the infamous, insatiable alien women that had haunted so many travelers' stories. But Ethan wasn't one to be intimidated. He stepped forward, his body tense, but his expression calm. The lead Voralan, a striking figure with skin the color of midnight and eyes that gleamed like polished silver, stopped just a few feet from him. She was taller than him by at least a head, her presence commanding but not overtly threatening. "I am Myra," she said, her voice melodic and soft, yet it carried a weight that made Ethan's pulse quicken. "You are from Earth." Her statement wasn't a question, but Ethan nodded nonetheless. "I am. My name is Ethan. I come in peace." Myra's lips curled into a small smile, though her eyes remained cold. "Peace," she echoed, almost as if the word amused her. "That is what all of your kind claim when they arrive." Ethan swallowed, but held his ground. "I'm not like the others. I'm here to understand." At this, Myra's gaze sharpened, and for a brief moment, Ethan thought he saw a flicker of curiosity behind her guarded expression. She turned slightly, as if in thought, and the other Vorlons shifted behind her, their glowing eyes never leaving Ethan. "Understanding," Myra murmured. "Few have sought it. Most who come are weak." Ethan wasn't sure how to respond. He had heard the stories, of course, the legends that spoke of men drained of their energy, of travelers who vanished without a trace. But standing before Myra now, he realized those tales didn't do justice to the truth. There was something far more complex, far more dangerous at play here. "I don't believe in the stories," Ethan said carefully. "I believe there's more to you, to your people." Myra's smile widened slightly, and she stepped closer, her presence now towering over him. "Perhaps," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath, "but there is always a price for understanding." Before Ethan could reply, Myra turned and began walking toward the distant horizon, her long silver hair catching the light of the twin suns. The other Vorlons followed her in silence, their movements as fluid as before. "Myra," Ethan called out, "what do you want from me?" She paused, turning her head just slightly, enough for him to see her eyes gleam with something unspoken. "Follow, if you are brave enough to seek the truth." And with that, she was gone, disappearing into the shimmering landscape. Ethan stood there for a moment, his mind racing. He had come here searching for answers, and it seemed like he was about to get them. But what those answers would cost him, he couldn't yet know. With a deep breath, Ethan began to follow. The hidden truths of Vorol. Ethan's footsteps crunched softly in the silver sand as he followed Myra and the other Vorlons into the heart of their mysterious world. The landscape around him shifted subtly, the crystalline trees swaying ever so gently, though no breeze could be felt. The suns had begun to lower, casting a surreal twilight across the alien horizon, painting everything in shades of blue and violet. For what felt like an eternity, they walked in silence. Ethan could feel the weight of eyes on him, not just from the Vorlons in front of him, but from the landscape itself. It was as if the planet was alive, watching, waiting. The air grew thicker as they ventured deeper, and an eerie hum began to vibrate through the ground beneath his feet. Myra led him to a massive structure that towered above the crystalline forest. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, a sprawling complex of translucent walls and spires that seemed to grow organically from the earth. The building shimmered, reflecting the dying light of the suns, giving it an otherworldly glow. It was both beautiful and foreboding. "This is our sanctum," Myra said, her voice breaking the silence. She turned to face him, her silver eyes gleaming with a mix of curiosity and something darker. "It is where you will learn the truth of our kind, if you are strong enough." Ethan didn't flinch. He had expected challenges, but he had no intention of backing down. "I came here to understand, whatever it takes." Myra studied him for a moment, as if measuring his resolve. She nodded once, then motioned for him to follow her into the sanctum. The interior was unlike anything he had imagined. The walls seemed to pulse with light, as though the entire structure was alive and breathing. The air was thick with energy, an almost electric charge that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Ethan's senses were on high alert as they moved deeper into the complex, the other Vorlons trailing silently behind. They entered a large chamber at the center of the sanctum. It was circular, with a high dome ceiling that shimmered like liquid glass. In the middle of the room was a raised platform surrounded by what looked like floating crystals, each one humming softly with a strange melodic sound. "This is the heart of Vorel," Myra said, her voice reverent. "It is the source of our strength, our connection to this world and to each other." Ethan stepped closer, feeling the pull of the crystals as they emitted a soft, pulsing energy. He could sense their power, but there was something else, a deeper current running beneath the surface, something ancient and primal. "You see, Earthling," Myra continued, "the stories you've heard about us are only partially true. We are not the predators the galaxy makes us out to be, but we are not harmless either. We thrive on energy, life force, as your people call it, but it is not as simple as draining or consuming. It is a symbiosis, a delicate balance." Ethan frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "A balance? Between what?" "Between us and those who are compatible," Myra replied, her gaze locking onto his. "We do not simply take. We give in return. The connection we form with others is more than physical. It is a merging of energy, of life itself. But it is dangerous for both parties. If the balance is not maintained, it can destroy us." Ethan's mind raced as he processed what she was saying. It made sense now why the Vorelans were both feared and revered. Their need for energy wasn't about survival alone. It was about something far deeper, something that went beyond the physical realm. "And what does this have to do with me?" Ethan asked cautiously. Myra's lips curved into a slight smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You are unique, Ethan Coleridge. Your energy resonates with ours in a way we have never seen before. It amplifies us, makes us stronger. That is why you were drawn here, whether you realize it or not." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He hadn't expected this. He had come here to study the Vorelans, to understand them, but now it seemed that he was part of something much bigger, something he wasn't sure he could control. "So what now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the growing tension in his chest. "Now," Myra said, stepping closer to him, "we test your strength." Before Ethan could react, the floating crystals around the platform flared to life, their hum growing louder and more intense. The energy in the room surged, and Ethan felt a wave of power wash over him, nearly knocking him off his feet. His vision blurred, and his heart raced as the air around him crackled with electricity. "Stay focused," Myra said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You must control the energy, or it will consume you." Ethan clenched his fists, grounding himself as best he could. He could feel the energy coursing through him, wild and untamed, threatening to overwhelm him. But he wasn't about to let that happen. He had faced danger before. This was just another challenge. Drawing on his training and years of experience, Ethan focused his mind, pulling the energy toward him and redirecting it. Slowly, the chaos began to subside, the wild currents of power bending to his will. The room around him seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, and for a moment, everything was still. When the energy finally settled, Ethan opened his eyes. Myra stood before him, her expression unreadable. The other Vorelans watched in silence, their glowing eyes filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "You are stronger than I thought," Myra said softly, her voice tinged with respect. "Most who attempt this lose control." Ethan exhaled, his body trembling with the aftereffects of the energy surge. "I'm not most people." Myra smiled, a genuine smile this time. "No, you are not." For the first time since arriving on Vorel, Ethan felt a glimmer of understanding. This wasn't just about survival or power. The Vorelans were seeking something deeper, a connection, a bond that transcended the physical. And somehow, he was the key to that. But even as he stood there, victorious, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than Myra was letting on. The energy he had felt, the overwhelming power, there was something dangerous lurking beneath the surface, something ancient and unstoppable. "You've proven yourself," Myra said, interrupting his thoughts. "But this is only the beginning. There is much more to learn, much more to understand." Ethan nodded, though a part of him wondered if he was in over his head. He had come here seeking answers, and now he had them. But with those answers came more questions, more uncertainty. As Myra turned to lead him deeper into the sanctum, Ethan followed, his mind racing with the possibilities. He had stepped into a world of mystery and danger, and there was no turning back now. Whatever secrets the Vorellans held, whatever truths lay hidden in the heart of their world, Ethan would uncover them. Even if it meant risking everything. The trial of connection. The silence of the Vorellum sanctum was thick with tension as Ethan followed Mira deeper into the complex. Each step he took felt heavier than the last, as though the air itself was charged with an unseen force. The pulsing light of the walls seemed to flicker in rhythm with his racing heartbeat, and every now and then he could feel a subtle hum of energy brushing against his skin, as if the very structure of the building was alive. Myra walked ahead, her tall, graceful figure cutting through the dim light like a shadow. Behind them, the other Vorellans followed in silence, their glowing eyes watching Ethan with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. There was something in their gaze, something that made Ethan uneasy. It wasn't just the hunger he had sensed earlier, it was something more primal, something far older and more dangerous than he had imagined. They reached a massive doorway at the end of the corridor, and Mira paused. The door itself was made of the same crystalline material as the rest of the sanctum, but it was intricately carved with symbols and markings that Ethan didn't recognize. He could feel the energy radiating from the door, strong, ancient, and pulsing with power. "This is where your true test begins," Myra said, her voice soft but serious. She turned to face Ethan, her silver eyes locking onto his. "You have proven your strength, but now you must prove your will. What lies beyond this door is the heart of our people, the core of our power. Only those who can withstand the connection may enter." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "The connection? What kind of connection?" Myra's expression remained calm, though there was a hint of caution in her eyes. "A connection between you and us, between our energy and yours. The bond we seek is not just physical, it is spiritual, mental, and emotional. It will test every part of who you are, and if you are not strong enough, it will break you." Ethan swallowed, feeling a chill run down his spine. He had faced danger before. He had been in countless life-or-death situations during his years of space exploration, but this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about something far deeper, something that could change him forever. But Ethan wasn't one to back down from a challenge. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to turn back now. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. Myra nodded, though there was a trace of uncertainty in her gaze. She placed a hand on the door, and for a moment, the symbols carved into the crystalline surface glowed with a soft, ethereal light. The door slid open with a low, resonant hum, revealing a vast chamber beyond. Ethan stepped inside, and his breath caught in his throat. The chamber was massive, larger than any room he had ever seen, with walls that stretched up to a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. The floor was made of smooth black stone that reflected the faint light of the crystals embedded in the walls. In the center of the room stood a massive, glowing structure, a pillar of light that seemed to pulse with energy. The air was thick with power, and Ethan could feel it vibrating in his bones. "This is the core," Myra said, her voice reverent. "It is the source of our strength, our connection to each other and to the planet itself. This is what sustains us." Ethan took a step closer to the glowing pillar, feeling the heat of its energy wash over him. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, intense, overwhelming, and yet strangely alluring. He could feel it pulling at him, beckoning him to come closer. Myra stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "To bond with us, you must first connect with the core. It will test you, push you to your limits. But if you succeed, you will become one with our people. You will share in our power, our strength, and in return, we will share yours." Ethan's pulse quickened. The idea of merging his energy with the Vorellans was both thrilling and terrifying. He had always been curious about the mysteries of the universe, always seeking to understand the unknown. But this was something beyond anything he had ever encountered. "I'm ready," he said again, though this time his voice was quieter, filled with a mix of determination and apprehension. Myra's eyes softened, and for the first time since he had met her, Ethan thought he saw a flicker of compassion in her gaze. "You are brave, Earthling," she said quietly. "But be careful. The core is powerful, and it will reveal parts of yourself that you may not be ready to face." Without another word, she led him to the base of the glowing pillar. The energy radiating from it was almost unbearable up close, and Ethan could feel his skin tingling as the power coursed through the air around him. "Place your hand on the core," Myra instructed. "Let the energy flow through you. Do not resist it. Let it guide you." Ethan hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, with a deep breath, he reached out and placed his hand on the pillar of light. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy shot through his body, so intense that it nearly knocked him off his feet. His vision blurred, and for a split second, he thought he might black out. But he held on, grounding himself as best he could, focusing on the connection. The energy of the core flowed into him, flooding his senses with power. It was like nothing he had ever experienced, raw, untamed, and overwhelming. He could feel it reaching into every part of him, searching, probing, as though it was trying to understand who he was, what he was made of. And then suddenly, it shifted. Ethan gasped as the energy began to pull at something deep inside of him, something he hadn't even realized was there. Memories flashed before his eyes, moments from his childhood, his time in space, his deepest fears and desires, all laid bare before him. It was as if the core was peeling back the layers of his soul, exposing him completely. He could feel Myra's presence beside him, her energy intertwined with his, guiding him through the process. But even with her help, the connection was almost too much to bear. The intensity of it was staggering, and Ethan could feel his mind teetering on the edge of collapse. But he couldn't stop now. He had come too far. With a final surge of determination, Ethan let go of his resistance and fully embraced the energy of the core. It flooded through him, filling every part of his being, merging with his own life force. The room around him seemed to dissolve into light, and for a moment, he felt as if he were floating in a sea of pure energy. Then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. Ethan staggered back, his hand slipping from the glowing pillar. He was breathing hard, his body trembling from the intensity of the connection. His mind was still reeling, trying to process what had just happened. Myra stepped forward, her expression calm, but filled with a deep sense of approval. "You did it," she said softly. "You have connected with the core. You are one of us now." Ethan blinked, trying to steady himself. He could still feel the energy coursing through him, though it was more subdued now, more controlled. He felt different, stronger, more aware of the world around him. The connection he had formed with the Vorellans was unlike anything he had ever imagined. But there was something else, something darker. As the energy of the core settled within him, Ethan realized that the connection had revealed more than just his strengths. It had also uncovered his weaknesses, his fears, his doubts, his insecurities. And now those things were laid bare, not just to him, but to the Vorellans as well. He looked up at Myra, his heart racing. What happens now? Myra smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Now, you learn to live with the truth. The core has shown you who you really are. It has made you stronger, yes, but it has also made you vulnerable. The bond we share is powerful, but it is also dangerous. You must be careful, Ethan. The connection can break you if you are not prepared." Ethan nodded, though the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. He had come to Vorel seeking answers, and now he had them. But the cost of those answers was higher than he had anticipated. As they left the chamber and the glowing core behind, Ethan couldn't help but wonder what the future held. He had bonded with the Vorellans, become part of their world, but in doing so, he had also opened himself up to a danger he hadn't fully understood. Whatever lay ahead, Ethan knew one thing for certain: his journey on Vorol was far from over. The depths of the bond. The sky above Vorol was shifting, taking on a darker hue as the twin suns began their slow descent behind the distant mountains. The shimmering silver sand glowed faintly under the dimming light, and a cool breeze swept across the landscape, carrying with it the scent of something sweet and unfamiliar. Ethan stood outside the sanctum, the weight of his recent experience heavy on his shoulders. The connection he had made with the core still pulsed within him, a constant reminder of the bond he now shared with the Voralens. But with it came an overwhelming sense of uncertainty, a feeling that the line between his own identity and the alien energy inside him had begun to blur. Myra had been quiet since they left the core chamber. She walked beside him, her tall figure cutting a graceful silhouette against the twilight sky. The other Voralens had dispersed into the settlement, their glowing eyes still watching Ethan with a mixture of curiosity and something he couldn't quite define. It was as if they knew something he didn't, as if they were waiting for him to discover it on his own. "You've done well," Myra said at last, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of deep reflection. "Few outsiders can handle the connection as you have." Ethan nodded, though his mind was still racing. The surge of energy he had experienced in the core chamber had been unlike anything he could have ever imagined. It had been intense, almost overwhelming, but it had also left him with a strange sense of clarity. He could feel the Voralens' energy mingling with his own, like two rivers merging into one. "I can feel it," Ethan said, his voice quiet but steady. "The bond, it's powerful." Myra stopped walking and turned to face him, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the fading light. "The bond you share with us is not just a connection of energy, but of minds and emotions as well. The core reveals more than just your strengths. It shows your weaknesses, your fears, your deepest desires. It exposes the parts of you that you may not even realize exist." Ethan swallowed hard. He had felt that when the core had pulled at his memories and emotions, bringing to the surface things he had long buried, the images of his past, his childhood, his time as a solitary explorer, and even his most private fears had been laid bare before him, and before the Voralens. "It felt like it was tearing me apart," Ethan admitted. "I thought I wouldn't be able to handle it." Myra's gaze softened. "That is the nature of the core. It pushes you to the edge of yourself, forcing you to confront the truth of who you are. But the fact that you survived means you are stronger than you think. The bond will strengthen you, but it will also test you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Ethan's thoughts drifted back to the surge of power he had felt in the core chamber. He had controlled it, directed it, but only just. He could still feel the remnants of that energy within him, like a flickering flame waiting to be stoked. But with that power came a sense of vulnerability, a fear that he might lose control of it. "What happens if I lose control?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Myra's expression grew serious. "If you lose control, the bond can break, and if it breaks, it will destroy you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had known the risks when he first set foot on Vorol, but hearing Myra say it so plainly made the danger all too real. The bond he had formed with the Voralens was not something he could take lightly. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant vigilance and focus. "The bond is not permanent," Myra continued, her voice gentle but firm. "It can be severed if the connection is no longer sustainable, but doing so comes at a great cost to both you and us." Ethan looked at her, his mind racing with questions. Why would anyone want to sever it? Myra's gaze shifted, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes. Because the bond is not without sacrifice. It connects us on a level that goes beyond mere physical or emotional attachment. It links our very life forces, and if one of us is no longer strong enough to maintain that connection, it can drain the other. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He hadn't realized the full extent of the bond he had entered into. It wasn't just a sharing of energy. It was a merging of lives, of existence itself. Then why bond with outsiders at all? Ethan asked, his voice tinged with confusion. If it's so dangerous, why take the risk? Myra's lips pressed into a thin line, and she glanced up at the darkening sky. Because we need it to survive. The energy of Voral sustains us, but it is not enough. We must seek out new sources of life force to maintain our strength, to ensure the continuation of our people. But it is not just about survival, it is about connection. We seek understanding, a deeper bond with others, and through that bond, we grow stronger. Ethan's mind whirled with the weight of her words. The Vorolans were not just predators, as the stories had suggested. They were something far more complex, a race driven by the need for connection, for unity. And in that need, they had found a way to merge their lives with those of others, forming bonds that were both powerful and perilous. So I'm part of that now? Ethan asked, his voice uncertain. Myra nodded. Yes, you are one of us now, in a way. But the bond is still new, still fragile. You must learn to control it, to nurture it. If you do, you will find strength beyond anything you have ever known. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to process everything. He had come to Voral seeking answers, and now he had them. But those answers had come with a heavy price. The bond he had formed with the Vorolans was more than just a connection of energy. It was a merging of lives, of fates. What do I have to do? Ethan asked, his voice filled with resolve. Myra's expression softened, and she reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. You must learn to balance the energy within you. The core has amplified your life force, but it has also exposed your vulnerabilities. You must face them, confront them, and master them. Only then will the bond be complete. Ethan nodded, though a part of him still felt uneasy. He had never been one to shy away from a challenge, but this was different. This was a challenge not just of strength, but of will, of self, and the stakes were higher than ever. Come, Myra said, turning to walk back toward the settlement. There is someone you must meet. Ethan followed her in silence, his mind still reeling from everything he had learned. As they approached the settlement, the faint glow of the crystalline structures came into view, casting an ethereal light over the alien landscape. The other Vorolans moved gracefully between the buildings, their glowing eyes following Ethan as he passed. Myra led him to a small, secluded clearing on the outskirts of the settlement. At the center of the clearing stood an older Vorolan woman, her skin a deep shade of indigo and her eyes a soft, glowing white. She radiated an aura of calm and wisdom, and Ethan could feel the weight of her presence even before Myra spoke. This is Zura, Myra said, her voice filled with respect. She is our elder, the one who has guided us for centuries. She will help you understand the bond. Zura turned to face Ethan, her white eyes studying him with quiet intensity. For a moment, she said nothing, simply observing him as if weighing his very essence. You have bonded with the core, Zura said at last, her voice soft but filled with an ancient power. But the journey you have begun is far from over. The bond you share with us is both a gift and a burden. It will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. Ethan met her gaze, his heart racing. I want to understand. I want to learn. Zura nodded, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. Then you must be willing to face yourself, Ethan of Earth. The bond will reveal your true nature, your deepest fears, and your greatest strengths. Only by embracing all that you are can you hope to master the connection. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. He had come to Voral seeking knowledge, but what he had found was something far more profound. The bond he had formed with the Vorolans was not just a connection of energy, it was a journey into the very heart of who he was. And there was no turning back. Confronting the shadows. The quiet hum of energy that surrounded Voral seemed to intensify as Ethan stood in the clearing, his eyes fixed on Zura, the ancient Vorolan elder. Her presence was both comforting and intimidating, a paradox of strength and serenity. Around them, the crystalline trees shimmered in the dim light of the twin moons, casting long shadows across the alien landscape. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the planet itself was waiting to see how Ethan would handle the next phase of his journey. Zura stepped closer, her white eyes glowing faintly as she studied Ethan. Though her expression was calm, there was something in her gaze that unsettled him, an awareness of his innermost thoughts and fears, as if she could see through the carefully constructed layers of his identity. "You have come far, Earthling," Zura said softly, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "But the true test lies ahead. The bond you have formed is not yet complete. To truly merge with us, you must confront the shadows within yourself, the parts of you that you have long ignored or suppressed." Ethan frowned, his heart skipping a beat. He had felt the power of the bond ever since the core had flooded his body with its energy, but he hadn't realized that the bond required more than just strength and willpower. It demanded something deeper, something far more personal. "What do you mean by shadows?" Ethan asked, his voice steady but filled with unease. "I thought the connection was about sharing energy." Zura's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes remained serious. "Energy is only the beginning. The bond we share is not just about power, it is about unity, about understanding. To truly connect with us, you must confront the parts of yourself that you have hidden away. Your fears, your doubts, your regrets. The bond will bring them to the surface, and you must face them head-on." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had always considered himself a strong person, someone who would handle whatever life threw at him. But Zura's words struck a chord deep within him, bringing forth memories he had long buried, memories of moments he had tried to forget, of choices he regretted, of times when he had felt weak and powerless. "I don't understand," Ethan said quietly, though a part of him already knew what she was asking. "What does facing my fears have to do with the bond?" Zura stepped even closer, her gaze intense, but not unkind. "Because the bond requires more than just strength of body or mind. It requires strength of spirit. And true strength comes from understanding yourself fully, from embracing both your light and your darkness. Only then can you truly merge with our energy with the core." Ethan looked away, his heart pounding. He had always prided himself on being in control, on keeping his emotions in check. But now, the thought of facing the parts of himself that he had kept hidden for so long filled him with dread. He wasn't sure if he was ready for that kind of introspection, if he was ready to confront the truth of who he really was. Zura seemed to sense his hesitation, and she placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Do not fear the shadows, Ethan. They are a part of you, just as the light is. Without darkness, there can be no light. Without weakness, there can be no strength." Ethan closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. He could feel the weight of Zura's words pressing down on him, forcing him to acknowledge the truth he had long avoided. The bond with the Vorelans wasn't just about power or survival. It was about acceptance, about embracing every part of himself, no matter how painful or difficult. "I'm ready," Ethan said at last, though his voice was barely above a whisper. He wasn't entirely sure if he believed his own words, but he knew there was no turning back now. The bond had already begun to change him, and the only way forward was through. Zura nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "Good, then come with me. The trial of shadows awaits." She turned and began walking toward the far side of the clearing, where a narrow path led deeper into the crystalline forest. Ethan followed, his mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. The air grew colder as they walked, and the shimmering trees seemed to close in around them, their glowing branches casting eerie shadows on the ground. After several minutes, they arrived at a small, secluded grove. In the center of the grove stood a circular stone altar, its surface etched with intricate symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly light. Surrounding the altar were several large, glowing crystals, their soft hum filling the air with a sense of anticipation. "This is the place where you will confront your shadows," Zura said, her voice solemn. "The crystals will draw out the parts of yourself that you have buried, the fears and regrets that have been hidden deep within your mind. You must face them, and you must accept them. Only then will the bond be complete." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had faced physical danger countless times in his life, had come face to face with death more than once. But this was different. This was a trial of the mind, of the soul, and in some ways, it was far more terrifying. What happens if I can't accept them? Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. Zura's expression remained calm, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. If you cannot face your shadows, the bond will break, and the energy of the core will consume you. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had known the risks, but hearing Zura say it so plainly made the danger all too real. The bond he had formed was fragile, and it required more than just strength or determination. It required vulnerability, honesty, and acceptance. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped toward the altar. The crystals surrounding it pulsed softly, their light growing brighter as he approached. He could feel the energy in the air, thick and heavy, pressing against his skin like an invisible weight. Zura stood back, watching silently as Ethan placed his hands on the smooth stone surface of the altar. The moment his skin touched the cold stone, he felt a surge of energy rush through his body, and his vision blurred. The world around him seemed to dissolve into darkness, and for a moment he was floating in a void, weightless and alone. Then the darkness began to shift. Ethan's mind was flooded with images, memories from his past, moments he had tried to forget. He saw himself as a young boy, standing on the edge of a cliff, looking out at the ocean below. He remembered the fear he had felt, the overwhelming sense of powerlessness as he watched the waves crash against the rocks, knowing that there was nothing he could do to stop the storm that was coming. The scene changed, and he saw himself years later, during his early days as a space explorer. He was alone in the cockpit of his ship, drifting through the vast emptiness of space, feeling the crushing weight of isolation. He had always been independent, always prided himself on his ability to handle anything that came his way. But in that moment, he had felt more alone than he ever had before, lost in the infinite void of the universe, with no one to turn to. More images flashed before his eyes, moments of failure, of regret, of weakness. He saw the faces of people he had let down, the choices he had made that he wished he could take back. The weight of those memories pressed down on him, threatening to overwhelm him, to break him. But Ethan knew that he couldn't run from these memories any longer. He couldn't hide from the parts of himself that he had tried to ignore. The bond demanded that he face them, that he accept them. With a deep breath, Ethan forced himself to stay grounded. He let the memories wash over him, letting himself feel the pain, the fear, the regret. He didn't push them away or try to change them. Instead, he embraced them, understanding that they were a part of who he was, just as much as his strength and resilience. The energy around him shifted, and the darkness began to recede. The visions faded, and Ethan found himself back in the grove, his hands still resting on the stone altar. The crystals around him pulsed with a soft, warm light, and he could feel a sense of peace settling over him, a calmness that he hadn't felt in a long time. Zura stepped forward, her expression soft but approving. "You have done well, Ethan of Earth. You have faced your shadows and accepted them. The bond is now complete." Ethan looked at her, his mind still reeling from the intensity of the experience. But beneath the exhaustion, he felt stronger, more whole. The bond had not only connected him with the Vorelons, but it had also forced him to confront the truth of who he was, to accept both his light and his darkness. "What happens now?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet but steady. Zura smiled, a look of quiet pride in her eyes. "Now you are truly one of us. The bond will grow stronger with time, and together we will share in the strength of the core." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle over him. He had come to Vorel seeking knowledge, and now he had found it. But the journey was far from over. The bond he had formed with the Vorelons was just the beginning. As the stars began to shine above the alien landscape, Ethan realized that his life had been forever changed. He had faced his shadows, and now he was ready to face whatever the future held. The price of power. The nights on Vorel were unlike anything Ethan had ever experienced. The twin moons hung low in the sky, their silver light casting long, ghostly shadows over the landscape. The crystalline trees shimmered with a faint glow, their branches chiming softly in the cool night breeze. In the distance, the settlement of the Vorellans seemed to pulse with life, its alien structures flickering like distant stars. Ethan stood at the edge of the grove, the weight of his recent trials still pressing heavily on his shoulders. He had faced his shadows, confronted the deepest parts of himself, and emerged stronger for it. But despite the newfound sense of clarity, there was something else lingering beneath the surface, a quiet unease that gnawed at the edges of his mind. The bond he had formed with the Vorellans was powerful, but it had come with a price. The energy of the core now flowed through him, intertwining with his own life force, and while it made him stronger, he could feel the strain of it, like a constant pressure building inside him. Zura, the elder, watched him from a distance, her glowing white eyes filled with the quiet wisdom of centuries. She had said nothing since the trial had ended, allowing Ethan to process the experience on his own. But now, as the night deepened, she approached him, her presence calm and steady. "You are troubled," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure how to put his feelings into words. "The bond, it's more than I expected. I can feel the power of it, but it's also overwhelming, like it's too much for me to control." Zura studied him for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "The bond is not something to be controlled, Ethan. It is a partnership, a merging of energies. The more you try to dominate it, the more it will resist you. You must learn to flow with it, to let it guide you." Ethan frowned, his mind racing. The energy of the core was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It wasn't just raw power, it was alive, almost sentient. It pulsed within him, responding to his emotions and thoughts in ways he couldn't fully understand. He had thought that mastering it would be like mastering any other challenge, through sheer willpower and determination. But Zura's words suggested something different. "How do I do that?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "How do I let go of control when everything inside me is telling me to hold on tighter?" Zura smiled gently, her eyes softening. "You must trust the bond. Trust yourself. The core amplifies who you are, but it does not change you. It enhances your strengths, but it also reveals your vulnerabilities. To truly embrace its power, you must first embrace all parts of yourself without fear." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. He understood what she was saying, but it wasn't easy. Letting go of control wasn't something that came naturally to him. He had spent most of his life relying on his own strength, his own abilities, to get through the challenges he faced. But this was different. The bond wasn't something he could fight against. It was something he had to accept, to live with. As if sensing his inner conflict, Zura placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm. "There is something you must understand, Ethan. The bond we share with the core is not just about power, it is about connection. Connection to each other, to the planet, and to the very fabric of life itself. The energy you feel within you is part of that connection, but it is not something to be feared. It is a gift, one that can guide you if you allow it." Ethan nodded, though he still felt a lingering sense of doubt. He had bonded with the Vorellans, faced his shadows, and emerged stronger. But there was a part of him that couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing something in the process, that the bond was changing him in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. "What if the bond changes me?" Ethan asked quietly, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "What if I'm not the same person after all of this?" Zura's expression grew somber, and she took a deep breath before answering. "The bond does change you, but it does not take away who you are. It only reveals more of what is already inside you. The core amplifies your essence, both the light and the darkness. But in the end, you are still you. The choice of how to use that power, how to live with that bond, is yours." Ethan looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He had come to Vorel seeking answers, seeking to understand the truth behind the Vorellans and their mysterious energy. But now, It seemed that the real journey was not about the Vorelans at all. It was about him, about who he was and who he would become. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Ethan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could handle it, but now I'm not so sure." Zura smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "No one is ever truly ready for the bond, Ethan. It is something you grow into, something you learn to live with. But you are strong, stronger than you realize. You have faced your shadows, and you have emerged whole. That is more than many can say." Ethan nodded, though the doubt still lingered in the back of his mind. The bond was powerful, more powerful than anything he had ever experienced. But it was also unpredictable, and the thought of losing himself to that power was terrifying. As if sensing his thoughts, Zura stepped back, her gaze growing distant. "There is something else you must know, Ethan. The bond is not just about strength or survival. It is also about responsibility. The core has chosen you for a reason. You are connected to us now, to this planet, in ways that go beyond the physical. The choices you make, the paths you follow, would affect not just you, but all of us." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't realized the full extent of what the bond entailed. It wasn't just about him. It was about the Voralans, about the very future of their people. The energy of the core was tied to the life force of the planet itself, and now that energy flowed through him. Whatever he did, whatever choices he made, would have consequences far beyond his own life. "I didn't ask for this," Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I didn't come here to be responsible for anyone else." Zura's expression softened, and she nodded in understanding. "I know, but the bond has chosen you, whether you wanted it or not. And with that bond comes power, and with power comes responsibility." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind reeling. He had come to Vorel seeking knowledge, but now it seemed that the knowledge he had gained came with a burden he hadn't anticipated. The energy of the core was powerful, but it was also dangerous. And now, it was up to him to decide how to use that power. Zura stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "You are not alone in this, Ethan. We are with you. The bond connects us all, but you must decide how to move forward. The core amplifies what is within you, but it does not control you. You are still the master of your own fate." Ethan looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He knew she was right. The bond didn't control him, but it had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand, and now he had to decide what to do with that power. Taking a deep breath, Ethan squared his shoulders and met Zura's gaze. "What do I need to do?" Zura smiled, a look of quiet approval in her eyes. "You must continue to learn to grow. The bond will guide you, but you must trust yourself. The core is powerful, but it is also delicate. It must be nurtured, respected. Only then will you be able to truly master its energy." Ethan nodded, his mind made up. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The bond was a part of him, and he would have to live with it. But he wasn't going to let it control him. He would learn to master it, to use its power for good. "I'm ready," Ethan said, his voice steady. Zura smiled, a look of quiet pride in her eyes. "Good, then let us begin." Together, they turned and walked back toward the settlement, the soft glow of the crystalline trees lighting their path. The night was calm, but Ethan knew that the journey ahead was far from over. He had bonded with the Vorelans, faced his shadows, and emerged stronger. But the real test was just beginning. The power of the core was within him now, and with it came the weight of responsibility. The future of the Vorelans, of the planet itself, was tied to him in ways he was only beginning to understand. And as the stars shone brightly overhead, Ethan couldn't help but wonder, what would he do with that power?